Dear colleagues, good afternoon. I'm glad to welcome you here at this session on the development of the city environment, shifting from quantitative indicators to qualitative indicators to quantitative. This session is a part of the whole regional agenda and the survey that was specially conducted for the Urban Forum. It estimates the index of the human potential and assesses cities in relation to the new economy and the human potential. Today, we're going to represent two leading cities. They were the leaders of this survey. As you know, the human potential has been measured for long and discussed for long. We have discussed continually the importance of new economics in cities, moving from agriculture to industry. And the new economy is to be based on services, consulting, and other new areas. The volume of this sector is growing continually, and you all, I think, know many scholars that studied this subject specifically. In particular, David Florida says that the companies now tend to hunt the human potential. They are not after the cities, they are after the people. And the people rotate and they move from cities to cities. They are looking for the cities that offer better conditions for the development of their potential. That's why cities compete for the human capital, which leads to the competition of companies and to their places in new sectors of economy. Today, we are going to discuss it. We will discuss how this type of economy is developing in Russian cities, what challenges they are facing, in what context they operate, including the federal legislation, economic challenges, and other issues. I'm very happy to introduce our speakers today. Let us start with myself. I think it's the easiest way. So the first participant of today's discussion is Alex Elley, partner of My Architects company. He is the developer of several regulations of civil construction. And the second speaker is going to be Alexander Plutnik, Deputy Minister. He represents the Ministry of Construction and the Utilities of Russia. He will make a brief report too. He will be followed by Andrei Golovin, Director of and the leading expert of Polis Consulting Company. The next speaker is Alexander Moore, head of Tyumen City Administration, and he will be followed by Ekaterina Dyba, representing High School of Economics, the Department of Urban Studies. The next speaker is going to be Aysen Nikolaev. He is the mayor of Yakutsk City. And the final speaker today will be Vitaly Stadnikov, head of Местные планировщики company. We also have several leading experts that will participate in our discussion as well. It's Mr. Roizman, representing Yekaterinburg City, and Anton Finagenov, the CEO of Territorial Planning and Urban Studies Institute. Now I'm happy to give the floor to Alexander, and we can start. Good afternoon. I suggest doing it the other way around. Let's first give the floor to experts, and that will be followed by our discussion. In this case, let me give the floor to Ekaterina. You are very welcome. Thank you. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to detail you on the study where I participated in this study too. It was delivered by High School of Economics jointly with Novaya Zemlya company. The core of this study was to assess the human potential of Russian cities. In the recent 10 years, the concept of the human potential and human capital has been repeatedly used, and it's mainly applied to the development of countries and regions. We have concentrated on cities. The UN, for over 20 years, has published an annual report evaluating the Human Development Index. It's based on 3 figures. It's the level of literacy, health condition of the population, and well-being. We have based on this methodology, but also considered the specifics of Russia. And thus, we have selected 5 indicators that also describe these 3 areas: healthcare, well-being, and literacy. And still, they reflect the true life of people. These 5 indicators are the basis to calculate the human potential index of Russian cities. We have not covered all Russian cities. There are over 100,000. But we have focused only on big regional centers with the population over 50,000 people. And we have covered 63 cities. We have divided them all into 3 strata. The first stratum is millennial cities, that is the cities with 1 million population and similar figures. The second stratum covers the cities with the population of from 500,000 up to 700,000 people. And the third stratum covers the rest. This helps us to assess the cities irrespective of their size and equalize any possible distortions. We have identified the cities with high-level indicators and with low-level indicators. We have developed several groups of cities with the leading cities and with outsider cities. At the next stage of the survey, we have compared the calculated human potential index with other indicators of the human life. It's the city infrastructure which shows whether the city is saturated with the required transport, healthcare, housing, and other infrastructure. The second block is construction, and it includes different indicators like the total square of newly built houses and square meters, construction permits, commissioning permits, and other things. And the third block shows whether municipal authorities provide support to small and medium proprietors. Our study is based on the methods of maths analysis. Finally, we concluded that there is no link between the cities, and there's no link between the number of population and our indicators. However, we have found out that the cities, bigger cities, are more sensitive to the infrastructure, and average cities mainly have the situation where municipal authorities support proprietors and small and medium business. However, I think that we have not got enough statistics, and we have mainly covered the support provided by municipal authorities, but we have no data on how the bureaucratic machine works, how the permits and other documents are issued, whether the federal budget provides some support to the city budget, and so on. Another thing to mention is a few words about the infrastructure. Mainly, it's based on quantitative indices. But if we focus on the human factor, we need the indicators that are related to human life. And in many cases, we could not understand what things should be included into our studies. For instance, it could be the number of school children per one school in the city. What does it mean? This figure, if the figure is small, it shows that schools provide services of low quality. And we have made a range of all cities in this respect. For instance, the big cities like Yekaterinburg and Chelyabinsk have very low indicators, very low level of satisfaction with the level of school services. But it doesn't mean that all schools are bad. Another factor that we analyzed is the transformation of economical structure. We have analyzed the products per capita, and all average and big cities demonstrate the average or medium or low level of industrial development. It means, and the rest are in the insider group. Right now, new economic sectors are becoming the leaders. Our view on the new economy is the added sectors generating a high added value that are based on the intellectual input. Many areas may be referred to this sector, including educational establishments, medical institutions, and other institutions referring to applied studies, IT companies, computer companies, and so on. This is a very broad range, and it's really difficult to select one leading component here. And we have selected the following indicator. It's the number of registered sole proprietors registered in this city per capita, generating the biggest input into the city's economy. As you can see, the cities referring to the group of leaders are ahead of outsiders. So this indicator is related to the human potential. And it means that the cities with a high level of human potential are favorable for the development of new sectors. All the above shows that, and I can make the following conclusions. There is no single recipe of success. All leading cities have their own development strategy. Some focus on balanced development and try to develop many sectors. Others concentrate on specific sectors. The second conclusion that I can draw is that the current system of indicators needs changing. The current quantitative indicators applied in statistics mainly used to meet some standards, but they're not really related to the human potential and human life, and they do not show whether the people are satisfied with some areas of their life and services or not. And finally, our study of the leading cities shows that if the infrastructure is maintained, it's enough. The infrastructure should be maintained on this certain level, and if so, the cities may concentrate on other sectors and other ways to develop the human potential. Thank you. I have just one small question. You have showed a list of cities, and it was followed by one slide on economics. It really shows that these two factors are interrelated, but you focused on the human potential, and you rated human potential, right? Yes, exactly so, but and we have divided all cities into 3 groups. And so this third group includes Yakutsk and Tyumen in particular. Do you have some other questions? If so, you're welcome to ask your questions, please. Okay, if so, let us proceed with the Q&A. We are going to change the order of our agenda. I first have a question to Alex Elie, our overseas colleague. Alex, as far as I know, London authorities amended London plan of 2011, which planned to introduce about 3,000 new apartments. But irrespective of that decision, some other regulations were introduced. It was London Mayor's Design Guide, and you worked on that too. Could you brief us on your goals? Why did you decide to draft these regulations? As far as I understand, the first document set some targets as the number of new apartments, while the other documents focused on some quantitative indicators. So was it really needed?
2 objectives. One is to manage the growth of London. And there's huge immigration. London is a powerhouse of economics, and there's huge pressure on housing. So the London plan sets out the ambitions in terms of the number of homes that we need to meet. But at the same time, there's evidence that we're building, or have been building, very poor quality homes. We have some of the lowest space standards in Europe, for example. The energy performance of buildings can certainly be improved. So, as well as balancing the demand for new housing, the numbers that we're trying to deliver, the Mayor of London has set out very ambitious qualitative standards, which we wrote into the Mayor of London's Housing Design Guide. And that sets out metrics in terms of the energy performance of homes, minimum space standards. We know from evidence that poor quality housing has knock-on effects in terms of well-being, people's health, pressures in the home if people are too crowded, poor performance in schools because children haven't got the space to study and the quiet spaces to get away from the rest of the family when they need to work. So there are a lot of knock-on consequences if we build badly. And so we have introduced a set of metrics where you can measure the design quality of new homes. We are now looking and seeing gradual improvement in the design performance of our new housing.
Спасибо. А каким образом измеряется, собственно?
Thank you. How do you measure design performance? How do you evaluate whether it's good or bad? Do you conduct any monitoring from the point of view of ultimate user?
Main monitoring happens at the design stage. So the municipal authorities have to appraise design proposals put forward. And in the design guide, there are about 60 metrics that the authority have to assess designs against. So for example, when you're looking at space standards, you need to think about how many people the home is intended to occupy or house. So a sort of family of 3 people can comfortably live in a flat of around 60 square meters. And we've developed empirical and ergonomic assessments of those that have come up with measurements. So a municipal authority can look at plans of new development, can see whether it meets the requirements, and then if it does, it's approved. In terms of post-occupancy evaluation, we're not very good at that. There isn't enough appraisal that happens once new housing is occupied. But I think some of our public sector housing providers, the housing associations, do surveys. They will go back after a year that a new development is occupied and see how satisfied residents are with their new homes.
Предъявляет ли этот документ какие-то требования к...
Does this document set any requirements for mixed use? Should this housing be of different typologies? Should it accommodate some services, for example?
It's urban sprawl. And I think the overarching London plan that the Mayor has set is very much focused on concentrating development into the cities on previously used sites, on what we call brownfield land. And that is very much promoting high density, good mixed tenure. So we have affordable housing mixed in with private housing. We have low cost market housing as well as high value market housing, all within single developments. But then also trying to make sure that we're catering for provision of retail, for education and schools, healthcare and so on. So often that's done at a strategic level, whereas the London Design Guide focuses purely on the residential.
Я еще раз вернусь к моему...
Once again, I'll revisit my previous question. How justified is this document? How important is this document to the one fixing quantitative indicators? What are the particular goals of this document? It can be just conditioned by practice, and in certain cases, this or that fact can be high quality or low quality. It's an abstract notion.
point, I think you can measure quality. Vitruvius, the Roman architect, defined quality as being about, he described it as commodity, firmness, and delight, by which he meant that buildings had to be functional, they had to be designed for the purpose for which they're intended. Firmness was about buildings that are made to last, that stand the test of time. And then delight, places that we aspire to live in, places that generate a sense of identity that residents can feel comfortable with and enjoy as a neighbourhood to live in. So there are modern ways of developing metrics to measure those three ideas, commodity, firmness and delight. And there was huge evidence before the introduction of the London Design Guide that actually a lot of housing in London wasn't good enough. It wasn't performing well. It was having knock-on effects with people's social well-being and health. So the imperative was there to improve housing. And it's not perfect, but we have come up with a system of measuring the performance of new housing. And the onus is on the developer, the private developers who build our new housing to meet those metrics and those set of requirements. But like any system, it's open to abuse, and I think we have developers who will try and get approval and exert pressure on the municipal authorities to approve schemes that don't necessarily meet the requirements in the interest of delivering numbers. So I think we have to be very mindful of balancing the pressure to deliver the housing we need, but also meeting the quality that will mean we're building for the long term.
Спасибо большое, Алекс. У меня, на самом деле, наверное, логичный следующий вопрос к Александру.
Thank you, Alex. The next question is to Alexander Albertovich. As far as I know, there are big changes. The Ministry of Regional Development has been transformed, and the tasks were delegated to another ministry. Certain amendments were made to the law on approval procedures for construction. Accordingly, the ministry now develops a certain position in the development of housing sector. To what extent the vision of the ministry coincides with what Alex Allert is saying on the qualitative and quantitative side? As far as I know, there are a lot of requirements for the development of housing development. Could you say a few words about it? Good afternoon. Well, you know, I agree with previous two speakers about the qualitative characteristics. At the first session today, when Premier Shuvalu was speaking, he provided some historical information about Moscow and different stages of its development. There were times when Moscow was supposed to be a factory city. Then it was called a village. And now it is a city that appeared on the border of times at the time of breakup of the Soviet Union and the beginning of the new country. Now the city is undergoing qualitative changes, and we can see it as we walk around the city. There are many educational institutions, new medical institutions, and now you can see in Moscow how difficult changes are that allow you to reach a new quality. The quality that Moscow is showing now, based on demand of the citizens, we all don't want to see traffic jams, but we are not ready for restrictions for the purpose of forming universal comfort. And how difficult some of the measures are, which have already become a rule in other countries and other cities. in their everyday life, behavior on the roads, for example. As to the social sphere, everybody wants to get high-quality service, but few people are prepared to pay for it the way it is accepted in other countries where this high-quality service is provided. The processes going on in Moscow now, in the next few years, will be going on in other regional centers, because people live there who have high-quality demands for environment and living. There was a forum in Petersburg and Vladivostok. I haven't seen the results of Vladivostok. Maybe some of you have been there. It's a fantastic city with fantastic opportunities for self-implementation. My colleagues said that Vladivostok is one of the European Russian cities. And these are not just politicians who said it, but young people who review cities in terms of quality of living. Ekaterinburg is a city of opportunities. It also used to be the city of factories and plants. Now they have old walls, which are especially valuable, and you can create a quality of life, a new quality of life. I really mean Ekaterinburg. It will accommodate World Football Cup. And it will become a motive for local authorities. Alexander Albertovich, I have a question. If we revisit the issue of new economy and the development of service with high added value, does the ministry see its task in creating conditions for such an economy, or is its task only technical? We are going to reduce administrative barriers in building and creation comfortable conditions for constructors, and we'll try to set certain parameters, metrics, on the quality of construction. You know, a lot is being done on changing constructions, materials, standards for them, and we'll set certain requirements for general plans for comfortable living conditions. Comfortable environment is not necessarily an environment where few houses are built or one or two story houses are built. We have seen that high density housing can provide as much comfort as low density construction. It's important to move to complex development of territories, not just to one object, as well as territories joining big cities. There should be projects on the development of inner territories that suit citizens' needs. All this requires special legislative regulation, because now it is not enough for an investor to have an understandable horizon to use certain plots of land. On the federal level, you're creating conditions for the regional and municipal level to create such conditions. I understand that it's the same fund of housing construction that works together with municipalities, and it affects the quality of environment, and the requirements are quite detailed for the construction of affordable housing. If in these spheres, is there understanding with municipal authorities what qualitative metrics are the most important, and what about quantitative characteristics? We work with municipal authorities, and the fund, as he sets the plots for auction, it sets certain standards for the housing to be built in these plots. There are certain requirements for economy class buildings, basic parameters. Recently in Hong Kong, we compared qualitative characteristics for economy housing and qualitative characteristics for Hong Kong and Russia. We were quite surprised. In Hong Kong, one room flat, 14 square meters. I think that for most Russians, it's difficult to understand how it can accommodate kitchen and bathroom and some living space. In Soviet times, one room flat was 36 square meters. This is about the standards that we have and that are used in developed countries. If you have questions, please ask. I have the following questions. According to the census, in the past 20 years, housing fund increased by 7 square meters per person. However, the way we have seen it from the presentation, some cities build a lot, and they offer a certain quality, resulting in a certain level of human potential. One of such cities was Tyumen. It has passed an interesting way for 10 years. They had a big budget, and they built a lot of different houses. I would like to ask Alexander Viktorovich, tell us what Tyumen has done in the past 10 years, which led Tyumen to such results, which showed Tyumen this way, and what does it look like in context of housing construction from the quantitative and qualitative point of view, and how do they interact? Thank you, dear friends. In 2001, we observed dramatic development in Tyumen. However, to provide comments on the information in our presentation, I would like to tell you something about the history of our city. The index of the development of human potential does not correlate directly with the development of industry. They don't depend on each other, actually. Tyumen has never been a really industrial city, like cities in Chelyabinsk and Sverdlovsk Oblast. Why? A big impulse was received by the city from 60s to 80s, when the oil deposits around were being developed. However, there was not much industrial production in Tyumen. Administrative resources were concentrated there. And the development strategy was written there, so we preserved this specialization. And Tyumen region positions itself as oil and gas service. Since that time, 2001, construction actively started in Tyumen. Two figures. At the beginning of 2000, the population was 570. In 2009, we were 600,000. In 2015, the population will be 700,000. We are growing by 20 to 25,000 a year through natural growth and migration. Unemployment rate is one of the lowest in Russia. Most people are coming there to work, and they find a good job. Tyumen,
the construction growth is 1 square meters per person, and currently it's about 2,000 square meters construction per 1 million people. It's the current construction rate. We have obtained several construction permits for the coming years. In the near future, the construction rate is not going to fall. We have always been the city which attracts mainly young and workable population. As to the potential, Tyumen has all core institutions of higher education, including Oil and Gas University, the Medical University, the University and Academy of Agriculture. So Tyumen's higher school has always been very professional, and we have trained many specialists with higher education, which adds some value to our rating. And another thing to mention, Tyumen is one of the few cities which has obtained all required documents for territorial planning. When we started this work about 10 years ago, we aimed to develop the general plan and other documents for the period until 2040, bearing in mind that the population will grow up to 1 million people. I think we need to speak to the mayor of Yekaterinburg, and he has always won in all nominations, and we have competed with them for ages. In all possible directions, we have competed for people and for the infrastructure and so on. Right now, we're approximately of the same sides. However, we are now after the goal to increase the population and to become the so-called millionaire city. In this case, we will catch up with Yekaterinburg. And we have good prospects. We are confident of our future, and we have good human potential to implement our plans. Thanks a lot. And a small question. You have mentioned that the city has been very active. You have introduced many housing. You have commissioned new houses, new apartments, and What helped you to develop this human potential in the city? What is your current management strategy, considering the budget deficiency or the reduction of the budget? As to the budget deficiency and affordability and the money, this is a philosophical issue. All depends on how well you can manage the funds that are available to you. We have survived different times. Hopefully, today we will be able to restructure our target indicators. We are currently the city of young people. Please remind me how many students we currently have. It's 44,000 preschool children and many students, plus 75,000 pensioners, and all the rest are the people in the active age that are working. So our current goal is to create a comfortable city for young people with children. And our priority now is to create proper working conditions to develop the infrastructure, because all newcomers must be confident that their children will be able to go to school or to a preschool institution, to the kindergarten, and to attend different groups, classes, and so on. The second question is related to life expectancy and the age of mortality. And here I can say that we would like to increase the average life expectancy. Therefore, we need to improve the quality of medical services. We are now constructing several new units of the medical academy. Plus, we already have some facilities like the Center of Neurosurgery and other medical institutions. But we are going to focus on the prevention of cardiovascular and oncology diseases. We also need to improve the infrastructure of housing facilities for medical workers. Thanks a lot. If someone has comments to make, you are very welcome, and your questions are welcome too. I have a question to Alexander. Please explain. So the subject of our session is transiting from quantitative indicators to qualitative parameters. So what are the main quantitative parameters for you, for your construction of new buildings, and how do you assess the level of comfort for the residents of Tyumen? Let me start with the end of your question. Right now, Russia has introduced many new ratings and systems of assessment. This is done by different organizations. Tyumen used to be a city, used to hold the second rating in the confidence of people. So it used to have the most confident residents that were reluctant to change their place of residence. And this is a good indicator already. They were very confident of the city that they lived in. And we are constantly improving our general plan, which is based on regional specifics. Plus, we have some sector-based regulations. They are related to the plan. And we aim to provide enough places in kindergarten, school, to improve conditions for young specialists. And still, we live under hard conditions, because business is after maximum profit. And we had to be firm. For instance, we had to struggle for parking spaces. There were lots of cries about that, but we had a firm position in our dialogue with the developers. The issue of parking spaces is one of the most important issues for us. And right now, they fully recognize our position, and the most advanced developers during their construction works offer to construct kindergartens at their own expense, plus they offer parking spaces for future residents. And this, they realize that this may be their competitive advantage. There are lots of new blocks, and the new buildings are sold actively, but the developers now are changing their attitude to the process of sales. Alexander, and you have mentioned the general plan. And what about this document? What about other documents of territorial planning? Do they help to achieve the right quality and to manage quality, or do they impede you? Well, there are always new challenges and new tasks, but the general plan has helped us to balance the management process, to develop long-term development strategies. We are constantly holding discussions with developers and others, but everything is okay if we understand the long-term development strategy. And besides, the general plan plus other planning documents is a big plus for investors, because they have a good idea how the city is going to develop and what the time frames are. No more questions so far. Some questions from the floor, but we will proceed with the questions from the floor in the end of this session. We will listen to them all. I have a question to Aysen. Yakutsk is one of the leading cities in the index of the human potential. Also, Yakutsk has introduced a large social infrastructure. Probably this has affected the results of the survey. But I have a question. Do you somehow monitor quality? So if some social infrastructure is introduced, including new buildings, do you have some initial requirements, and do you monitor later on whether everything complies with the standards? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In fact, the success story of Yakutsk is very similar to the story of Tyumen that we have heard now. But the main specifics of our city is the number of it's the city of extremes, because we have the biggest range of temperatures, down to -60. So I can observe no winter in Moscow, actually. I have been warned that I would see winter here, but in my view, it's no winter. And so these extremes and our experience, and we have lived here for ages, make us to be extremely attentive to life quality. Unfortunately, many things have been lost in the USSR time, and we have many buildings in the deteriorated condition. We are trying to set some goals here. As to the social infrastructure, we start with educational institutions. Yakutsk is one of the most fast-growing cities in the Far East. In the recent years, the population has grown by 35%, and now the number of residents is about 350,000 people, while it used to be 150,000 people about 3 years ago. This is also the city of students, and the main establishment here is the Federal University. We have developed a general plan and territorial plans for all districts. Right now, we are shifting from random construction to block-based construction. I was appointed to this position in 2012, and the first question that I addressed to my colleagues and to the utilities was as follows. Why do we only have open-air bus stops where the people are cold? But they replied that it was not possible to make them warm. However, we have developed a special project, and now we have 3 warm bus stops. This is something like a building where someone can have a cup of coffee, where he is warm, where he can use a toilet or probably pay for communications, for his mobile phone, and there are also terminals, maybe even with the state services. Besides, there's a monitor indicating the schedule of buses coming and going. The budget has not spent a penny on that, and this has all been done by private business. This project is developing, and I hope that we will have more warm stops like that. Officially, this year, we have 512 bus stops in total. Of them, only 300 stops are inside the cities, and the rest are in the suburb. So we hope in the current 3 years to increase the number of warm stops up to 100, especially inside the city. Our next priority is kindergartens. We are now constructing new ones because they were not enough for all children, and we are trying now for this purpose to acquire the ground floors of new builds and to use these premises for kindergartens. And there may be several rooms and premises there. One room is used for kitchen, one is used for the bedroom of children, and there's also a very big room which is used for playing and so on. Mr. Fursenko, the president's advisor, mentioned recently that he saw the best ever kindergarten in our city. He said it was unrivaled, and I have also spent some part of the budget on medical equipment for children. Many people said that I could do without it, but I thought it was vital. Plus, we continue the construction of schools. However, we are restricted by high costs of construction. And as to a residential block, it's also very expensive, and the normal price of a new construction for the people currently residing in deteriorated buildings is 50,000 rubles per square meter, while now the prices offered by developers are much higher, from 60 or 70. That's why we can't really relocate the people living now in dissatisfactory conditions, and they have to queue, and we're trying to improve the situation. We try to minimize costs, and we know that some of the current houses will be in the dissatisfactory condition in about 20 or 30 years. The budget funds are not enough, and we need additional funds like from business or corporate funds. And do the city understand these new economic conditions? Do you do that only because it's vital to construct kindergartens and medical institutions? Or does it go in line with some mission, with some view on the human capital and the city's potential? Do you think that you need to restructure the city and your policy? Do you apply new approaches and new requirements to medical institutions and educational institutions? The so-called new economy is really coming to Yakutsk, and we hope that the social infrastructure projects in the Far East will be successfully implemented. One of them runs in our city. It's the plant of composite materials. The construction was started about 5 years ago, and we hope this is going to be the enterprise of a new level. We will eventually construct a cluster of composite materials supplying the whole Far East. And the whole industrial cluster is diamonds and jewelry. It's the so-called Diamond Valley. I hope it will be based on new technologies and new approaches. We're actively working on that too, though there are some issues with the taxes.
And another project, we need to understand that from Yakutsk to export something heavy is too difficult. Our transport expenses will be too high. So it should be light and be expensive. Basalt and diamonds are just what we need. Strange as it may seem, in Irkutsk now, IT industry and film industry are developing now. We are second after Moscow now, even ahead of St. Petersburg, based on the number of films made. There are commercial films. They shoot films themselves, they distribute them, and IT industry. Some of our companies are quite active all over the world, and now their business is dozens, millions of dollars. Software and computer games. What about social economic processes, the development of business processes, IT? Is it somehow registered by the municipal authorities, and does it somehow influence planning? In 2012, our university created a strategy till 2032. A new economy, IT is part of new economy. I mean, representatives of our Technopark. We have an action plan for 6 months, who has fulfilled what, and everything is taken into account. I pin my hopes with these people. Does anybody have any more questions, comments? Andrei Vladimirovich, I have a question to you. As an experienced specialist, you worked in Perm. To what extent in cities like Yakutsk there are objective processes of a new economy, and what legal tools are there within current legal framework in order to target this new economy, new socio-economic processes, social strategy, how to organize interaction with other levels of government authorities. I would make my answer broader. Transition from quantity to qualitative indicators and how it can be fixed in documents. At any stage of urban development, nobody has ever given up quantitative development, and quality has always been described through quantity. There is a close connection between quantitative and qualitative indicators because we discuss standards and planning. However, the main thing is that these qualitative indicators on macro level could also be tested and implemented. The modernistic approach that we criticize based on quantitative indicators. Now, there were certain standards and qualities meant, but they were implemented as normative documents. Now, we set new requirements for the quality of life and new economy. And in fact, we have failed to create an implementation tool. For example, it's necessary to create affordable living tool. You can write how much it should cost, how much of it you need. If you just send it from above to bottom, you will reach negative results and create a problem for the future when the environment will be unfavorable. So instruments, normative documents have been created. However, they are not implemented fully because there is no mechanism for discussion. In London, this is solved through guidelines, qualities, characteristics, not just technical requirements or safety requirements, but qualitative requirements. And there is a stage of discussion, and community comes to an agreement with authority as to what they understand under quality. Later, it is necessary to discuss what this quality will look like. Today, there was an interesting example on Singapore as a qualitative characteristic. "10 minutes distance for some object." And if you don't define recreation place, you will have a lot of problems. In the picture, we have seen a sports complex with water polo, and you can walk there within 10 minutes easily. That's a whole complex of events. So the system has been created, but so far it has not been implemented in any city in the form of discussion of quality and how we achieve it. It's time to fill the documents with these contents. In Perm, with strategic master plan, we formed approaches to quality on macro and micro levels. What streets will look like, It is not a normative document, but it contains guidelines based on the goal of the street, so that it would be pedestrian friendly. Microeconomic segment should be developing there. After all, this becomes part of land use and not just copied from other cities, from federal government standards. This is a conscientious position of the city, of developers, of economic participants that participate in the transformation of the city. So municipal authorities can establish these norms on the municipal level. What prevents cities from doing it? Speaking of successful cities, there are certain problems. The necessity for negotiations is very broad. There should be vertical negotiation and interdisciplinary negotiations. And until such document is launched, political leaders should play an active role and feel the smallest projects so that political will would be felt. And each small project should be finalized. Why doesn't it happen now? We used to live in a system where everything was prescribed, and it wasn't necessary to think how to organize our lives in cities. And I hope that now these forums and interest of a broad range of people, and this will make this system develop. How long it will take does not depend on us. I would like to provide some comments. Affordable housing is bad. This is a wrong statement, and international experience and Russian experience speak of the opposite. Affordable housing is comfortable housing. It is affordable due to certain tools, and it's affordable for certain groups of people, but it is high-quality housing, and its energy efficiency is as high as in the business class housing. And the second thing, about kindergartens. The same is true of schools. New quality is new standards. When my sister went to school, she went there by metro, several stops. Now it's hardly possible. Everybody thinks it's normal to go to school in your courtyard. I used to go to school and I had to walk for 10 minutes, but we had 2 shifts. And now it would be hard to imagine a school where primary school pupils would go to school in the second shift. Now it's time to discuss changes in the approaches to the principles of city planning, the number of schools, kindergartens, and whether it is impossible to build intermunicipal schools or kindergartens, and they will spend the whole day there. Now there are a few experts in the audience who work with schools and kindergartens. They know a lot about it. I think it would be interesting to talk to them. We suggest that municipal officials talk to them. Thank you. I have a follow-up question. Of course, there is a quality of construction and standards of construction. How does it work on municipal level? How do you help municipal authority in forming high-quality housing? The work of municipal authorities based on the established parameters, together with heads of municipal authorities, we need to start changes in the approaches to form new districts in a new way and reform the districts that have already been built. We have experts in the first row, Anton Finagenov and Evgeny Roisman. Please join our discussion. Expert on social infrastructure, please come up here. And Rosella is in the back row. Please, Rosella, stand up. Vitaly, I have another question to continue this discussion. Maybe we see it in a different way on the local level, on the municipal level. The formation and development of territorial planning documents. What difficulties do cities experience now based on qualitative indicators connected with quantitative indicators? These are independent systems. What prevents cities from focusing on new economy and taking into account qualitative indicators in addition to quantitative ones? I think that new economy is the time of crisis. And if we are guided by them, we walk in the direction of quality. And currently, authorities are trying to build as many square meters as possible and not react to the situation. Yes, we see some positive leaders. However, the demographic situation in most cities, we just know that there are few big cities in which population is growing. In other places, it is dropping or replaced by unqualified population. There are few examples, including the example of Perm, when beautifully developed documents, strategic documents, or city regulation documents started being implemented. A team is replaced, authority is replaced, and there is no political will. The process stops. As to economy class and affordable, the main issue is that economy class does not mean affordable. Priority in economy class is just the end to our cities because it's the market that regulates the quality of housing. It is not true that we can't imagine the flats of 14 or 18 square meters. In Moscow region, there are a lot of proposals on studios of 18 square meters. The same trend is seen in other cities. All the developers are eager to pass over to minimal parameters. I'm from Samara, and it launches about 1.5 million square meters housing a year, though population is dropping and the quality of market is deteriorating. As a result, districts appear that immediately look like ghetto. One time, simple housing, low quality. I'm not going to tell any names. It's one of the social programs. It's just a ghetto. It's the electorate that we get as a result. And if we maximize or speculate economy class housing and construction priority is a road to the loss of local self-government. No attempts or efforts to demonstrate millions of square meters did not save our city from losing the right to lose its mayor. Thank you.
The new developed territories that are becoming a ghetto, as you said, provided you have a demographic crisis. So, who inhabits this place? Is it the migrants from regions? And what is the economic driver for the development and of this place? And this is affordable housing. It should be attractive for buyers, but it needs to be supported by state programs. We should develop the program of renting housing. But the housing construction programs in our city and in the region do not really consider the quality of construction. The quantitative targets are quite clear. It's the number of square meters per capita that are to be introduced. But we have no idea whether it's going to be one resident in a room or 3 residents, and the number of people per household and so on. We have no idea about these figures. There may be different situations. Sometimes buyers are trying to get something luxurious, but sometimes a city just buys low-quality housing, and they are very poor. And the developer will, in this case, accept an unfinished building which is not supplied with the required infrastructure if he is under some bad pressure. But I have a question to Alexander. Let's get back to the fund of housing construction. How do you resolve these situations? What mechanisms do you apply? How do they work? What are the mechanisms of local lending? And we have heard a very interesting presentation. The project you mentioned is well known. However, we can't find a federal document, probably Samara has its own documents. So no one has ever set the target to introduce unfinished or low-quality housing. And construction permits are issued by municipal authorities. At least it has been so until recently, and I hope it will persist in most of the municipality. And in any case, this is the responsibility of the administration or the head of a particular municipality. He understands that he needs to take care of living conditions for his future electorate. You have given some examples here. It's the worst possible events that could happen in one area and could happen to a person who is going to live there. It's unrelated to federal programs or federal standards. As to the funds programs, there are some additional plans to develop the infrastructure for economy class housing. In spring 2014, we introduced the provision on the so-called Dutch auctions. The developer, the municipality, has the right to supply a developer with a landlord almost for free if he provides houses to them. But what about the Council of the Federation? What is their target of housing construction in the cities? If the authorities are interested in construction, and what will be the rate of this construction? Is it going to be based on demand or what? Certainly, we always need to comply with the procedure, and there are many administrative impediments. We will proceed with your question, but we have only 2 minutes left till the end of this session, so you have only 2 minutes to ask questions. I know that 60% of the population want to improve their living conditions. If now we ask you to raise the hands, all those willing to improve their living conditions, probably it will be about over 20%. And you have mentioned the factors like the demand and the supply, but these are not the only factors influencing housing construction. Many administrative districts and many municipalities create impediments for developers, preventing them from penetrating into the market. They have just no access to the market, and even if they have contacted all relevant inspectorates and supervisors, there is no favorable climate for construction in Russia. Therefore, our ministry aims to develop competition in housing construction, and always we need to set the right target for new houses. Now, let's proceed with the questions from the floor. Here's Anton Finagenov. You're very welcome. Good afternoon. I would like to take the opportunity of the Deputy Minister present here. We often face, and we work on the city environment, we always often face the situation that our spatial plans are only based on qualitative indicators. Nothing has changed here. Is there some federal process to change the current indicators to analyze the situation? And if this process is slow, why is it so? Do you think that everything is good as it is? What do you mean the statistics and indicators delegated from the authorities. What do you mean from the authorities? Well, I mean there are mandatory standards. They're introduced by top authorities, and it's ours. We have to comply with these standards, and they're expressed in numbers. On the other hand, there are some quantitative indicators like the quality of medical services and so on. As to the quality of medical care, this is not a question to me. As to construction, well, partly the indicators have been changed, but if you have, we can have a more detailed discussion, and you can tell me what else needs to be changed. As to educational institutions, we recently started a big discussion on that. I have discussed it with colleagues, and we think about a modern educational institution for children. We are trying to compare the Asian and European approaches and the quality of social services provided by kindergartens. Thanks a lot. We have, in fact, run out of time. We have only time for one more question. You're welcome. Or is this a comment? I represent the Duma of Perm. We have had a very interesting discussion on the correlation between quantitative and qualitative indicators and the attempt to incentivize the construction of new houses artificially. But we need to understand that the regulations of land use, measurements, and design, city planning are mainly related to money. We don't need new standards. The construction standards and city planning, city architecture and city planning standards are the same. And these attempts to create some artificial incentives to change, if you change your spatial planning strategy and site surveys irresponsibly, this leads to a desperate situation. It may happen that we are unable to comply with the targets that we set. Thanks a lot. And let me say some words in conclusions. In fact, this discussion has reminded me of one article written by Mr. Gaidar in the year 2000 or something. And this article described the situation in the energy sector, in the housing sector, and some other sectors. And the State Planning Committee never received the outcomes, the information on the final result. And no one could understand what the outcome of this particular construction was. So I think our discussion leads us to the following conclusion. The qualitative and quantitative indicators are to be equal and are to be interrelated. This must be done both on the federal and the municipal level. We need to strengthen this vertical link, and it must be transparent and quite clear. Thank you all for participating, and hope we will see each other soon.